Hey, nature photographers. Looks like 2024 is coming to a close. December 29th, just a couple of days left. It's been an incredible photography year for me. I've shot well over 500,000 images this year. And what I decided to do for my year-end video, I'm going to do kind of a combination of how did I get the shot, but a review of my top 10 images for 2024 according to me. So I've got a couple of bonus images in there as well. So what we're going to do, we're going to take a walk through the images in chronological order. And I'm just going to explain to you some of the different elements that went into the image, Fieldcraft, some settings, how I use my gear and how I got the shot. So, a lot of people want to do their top 10 images at the end of the year or top however many, and I think it's a great idea. But I really like to go a little deeper, so this will be a little longer video. But the reality is what I want to do is to use my year-end in review to teach you some different elements of how I got these images so that the next time you're in the field, some of these principles, some of my sayings, some of the post-processing tips might come into play. So I've loved 2024, but I'm very excited about 2025 because in just a few days, I'm going to be in Zimbabwe and Zambia on a green season photography adventure. So stay tuned. Let's jump right into these images. Howdy from West Texas. I'm Lee Hoy, professional nature photographer, and this is my YouTube channel, Lee Hoy Photography. I'm an OM System Ambassador, photography workshop instructor for Wildside Nature Tours and Precision Camera and Video, and contributing author for the Journal of Wildlife Photography. Well, my first workshop of the year was Yellowstone National Park in winter. I did 4 tours in Yellowstone in 2024. All of them had wolves. All of them had some really great animals. However, there was one group in particular whose luck was beyond all imagination. And that was, we were the first ones on site and the last ones to leave a wolf bison hunt. And I took over 17,000 images that day, shooting at 50 frames per second. We had all different kinds of lighting conditions, overcast, sunny, backlit, and it was really both challenging and enjoyable. The wolves were on the other side of a river as they continued to harass, pester, attack this bison. And one of my favorite images of the year is this. A couple of the black young males in the in the pack had just rested at the base of a evergreen tree. The bison was just off to the right, out of the picture a little ways. And as we all know, these stunning yellow eyes on these wolves just jumps out at you. The nice dark background, the crisp snow in front. Their pelt is just gorgeous with that one having some nice gray hairs. I took quite a few shots while these two laid next to one another. And I was shooting tight. This isn't cropped. We weren't that far away. We were right at about 75 yards, really about, the minimum distance you should be. And what I like about this particular image is that on the wolf whose eyes are making the best contact, ears are up, forward. The light was soft, so you get great details. In post-processing, I darkened the tree a bit to help make the wolves stand out more. On the snow, this is where exposure is very important. Using live highlight alerts that the OM system offers, you can nail your exposure every single time. I mean, it's so easy in snow. You slow your shutter speed down until you see some red highlight alerts on the snow, and then you increase your shutter speed a third or 2/3 of a stop. That means I'm going to capture as much detail as possible in the wolves, and I'm going to preserve the detail in the snow. And if you look at the snow, you'll see the sharpness of the snow. That comes from proper exposure. It also comes in post-processing from applying some texture just to the foreground there. I love this image, and I'd be hard-pressed not to say it's certainly in one of my top 3. When people ask me what I do and what comes up, this is one of the top images I share with them from 2024. What I like to do in post-processing, particularly when eyes are pretty bold in an image, I like to select just those with a mask in Lightroom and brighten them a bit and then apply a little clarity. So that's a little tip on post-processing some eyes to make them pop more. I like to throw a little texture on pelt like this, just give a little more detail. This is at ISO 2000, so again, great detail in this image. My shutter speed was 1/1250th, and I'm at 1,000 millimeters, so I'm pushing my shutter speed a little bit. However, I was seated on my hind end in the snow, resting my elbow on my knee, so I had a pretty good, stable platform to shoot. Aperture comes in at 5.6, so again, nice shallow depth of field. I'm down low. I got down as low on the riverbank as possible so I could shoot at eye level. They were taking a break, but you'll notice the wolf on the right is looking off to the right. These guys kept a close eye on the bison, and any time the bison tried to lay down, rest, or even graze, the wolves, the young wolves would get up and go harass it. They literally wore it out. The alpha female and alpha male were up high, and they would come down occasionally to check. But Fieldcraft here is, these wolves were shy. Fieldcraft is, keeping your voice down, paying close attention to the action, not fiddle farting around chimping to see what you've got before, because every moment had something different going on. So this is one of my top 10 images from 2024. So my second image in chronological order is also from the wolf bison hunt during the Wildside Nature Tours Yellowstone in Winter Workshop. People often, when I tell them I shoot in SH2 drive mode, which is up to 50 frames per second, and the key with drive modes is when you hear the phrase up to, that is in perfect conditions, with autofocus working well, with not too high an ISO. So your frame rate, that's the max. It can often be a little lower depending on what the camera's having to do. But I like shooting in as many frames as possible for wildlife because you never know what split second action you're going to capture. And this image right here of the alpha male biting down on the maw of one of the younger males is a perfect example of why I don't care how many images I capture. I only care about capturing the best visually compelling images, and this is certainly one of those. The reason this image works, if I had one thing I really don't like about this image, it's the little shrub and the partial head in the upper right of the image. No, I'm not going to clone that out. A, it would be a nightmare, and B, I just don't feel like it needs it. Because the reality is the center of attention and action in this is strong enough. Well, this image was shot at ISO 12,800, 1/1000th of a second, just right there at the minimum to stop the action at f6.3. I'd been shooting this group because they'd been chasing the alpha male around, so I added a little bit more depth of field than normal for this image. What I like about this image are the leading lines, okay? What you'll see here is that all the attention of all the young males is drawn right to the alpha male and the fact he's biting down on the maw of this other one. So the eyes are all focused on the same thing. So every wolf you look at, points you to the action. And I love the fact you can see the gums and the teeth and the eyes. The eyes really help make this image, the eyes of the alpha male. Now, when editing, you'll notice my exposure spot on. Again, I'm just metering off the snow. So look at all the detail in the pelt of the wolves. You'll notice that every wolf is distinct from the other wolves. If this were underexposed, that wouldn't be the case. If I overexpose my snow and tried to pull it back down, it's going to be a white, muddy mess. There won't be detail, right? There won't be texture in the snow. If I underexpose and try to brighten it, it's going to be a gray, muddy mess. Nailing your exposure on snow is very important. So I like the leading lines. I like the exposure. I like the detail. I'm glad it was overcast light. Again, getting that nice detail. Yep, I'm shooting at a higher ISO, but I suspect anybody watching this video, particularly the haters and the trolls that would say you can't shoot at high ISO, they would love to have this image. So image number 2 in my top 10 for 2024. Well, image number 3 for 2024, no surprise, it's also from Yellowstone in winter, but a very different image. This was a morning where it was extremely cold. I want to say it was around -10 to -15, hoarfrost covering the sagebrush, and we had this line of bison walking up the river in the Lamar Valley. Strong backlighting, and I love, this is not black and white, this is a color image, but I love the tonality in this image. Obviously, there's pretty strong dynamic range, so nailing your exposure here is important. If you look on the far left of the image, you'll see a hot spot on the snow where the sun is shining brightest. That's what I metered off of, okay? So I dialed back until the last bit of highlight alerts disappeared there. And you'll notice I have nice detail in the darker sagebrush. I have nice detail in the snow. You can see the tracks. And the bison, I wanted to be silhouettes anyways. I wasn't worried about a lot of detail in the bison. If you shoot this image trying to get detail in the bison, it's going to be god-awful. You'll just blow everything out. You'll have this dark blob in the foreground. The key here is my Fieldcraft in terms of getting low. So I'm shooting the 150 to 400 right over the top of the sagebrush. And that backlit sagebrush, you can see the hoarfrost giving some nice crystalline type appearance. It lends itself to this really cool, the sagebrush color mixed with the ice and mixed with the dark shadows. But this image, due to the depth of field, so I shot at 5.6, ISO 400, 1/10,000th of a second. There was a lot of light, okay? And my 150 to 400 is at 150 millimeters. So I'm zoomed all the way out. But I got down low because what I wanted to do, I wanted the eye to lead right towards the bison. And this perspective is what makes this image really nice for me. I love this image. This would look great printed on acrylic. I'd love this image on acrylic. I also did not want to include a lot of the dark background. You'll see some shadow there in the upper left. I really want to include the snow and the foreground and then just this simple line of bison walking along the Lamar River. Their shadows play a nice part. So in post-processing, I applied in Lightroom a little bit more of lens blur. It almost has given it a bit of a tilt shift lens effect to this image. I did not do a tilt shift lens effect, but what I did do was apply a little bit more lens blur in Lightroom just to give it a little bit of that feeling. So I love shooting silhouettes. Silhouettes are generally best when the sun is low in the sky. It gives a little bit more dimensionality and length to the shadows, and it doesn't make the harsh highlights and the harsh shadows quite as strong. They're a little less strong, but still rendering a lovely image. So for me, this image is about tonality, getting low. I shot a lot of shots. You know, it would have been nice if the bison had been in a straight line with a little bit of separation between them, but you know, that's getting about as picky as one possibly can. So getting low and shooting low is often the key because we're up on a road, up on a hill looking down. So standing up, this image, if I stood up, you wouldn't be seeing this image. I wouldn't like this image nearly as much. There'd be a lot more of the riverbank in front of the bison. You feel like you're in the middle of the sagebrush, seated, looking through it to see these bison. And that effect comes from my elevation shooting, being on one knee. Furthermore, when you're shooting on one knee, not that I needed any more stability at 1/10,000th of a second, but I always like to put my left elbow on a knee and then hold a big lens on top of that. It just gives it that much more stability. Well, image number 4, we've left Yellowstone National Park, and now we've jumped to the Peruvian Amazon Riverboat Adventure. That's another Wildside Nature Tours workshop. Love this workshop, and I love the Amazon. But you know what? There's the last day of the workshop. We actually head south of Lima, Peru, along the coast to a little Mexican village. I'm sorry, to a little Peruvian village along the coast with an island, a big rocky island, just not far offshore. So we take these little wooden kind of dinghies around. Now the waves, once you get on one side of the island, can be pretty rough, and it's got a wooden cover on the boat, so there is a lot of rocking. It's very challenging shooting. So knowing that makes this image even more special in my book because you can have 1.5 feet more of rocking on these little boats. You're kneeling in a wooden boat. I always take knee pads with me on trips, on workshops, where I might be kneeling on hard surfaces, rocky surfaces, cactus, even cold, wet. You know, sometimes you just don't want to ruin your pants, and knee pads can come in handy for that. So I'm kneeling in a wooden boat in rough waves, shooting in the ocean, looking back towards the cliffs. And one thing that drives me nuts when I see a lot of bird photographers in the field is they'll take a few shots and literally say the phrase, I think I got that. I freaking hate that phrase. That goes against everything that I think photography ought to be about. And that's my opinion. You may disagree. I hate the phrase, I think I got that. That usually means they're bored and they want to move on because they don't understand what it means to capture a visually compelling image. They're just, check, I photographed a bird I saw. Oh my God, I just absolutely despise that mindset. If that's you, really work on changing that mindset. Work on capturing visually compelling images instead of collecting images. Okay, there's a difference in the art and science of visually compelling images and to me, the very boring pursuit of just documenting everything I saw. I'm fine. I know some of y'all enjoy that, and I don't begrudge you that, but I just hate that phrase. Just drives me nuts. So the reward in this image, shooting at 50 frames per second, is unbelievable for me, and I will tell you why. Let's take a look at this image. This is one of the beautiful, and I can't remember if this is an imperial. I always forget the name of this cormorant or shag along the Peruvian coast, and I'm not too worried about identifying the subjects in the image, particularly for this particular purpose. Let's take a look at this image. First, the bird is flying in from left to right. Now, if you think that I intentionally framed this shot with the wings where they are and the Inca turns in the background, there is no way you can intentionally do that. That would be brutally difficult. But what I could do was shoot it at as many frames per second. I could meter off the bird's guano on the rocks prior to this shot so that the white on the cormorant and the Inca terns would not be blown out. What I could do is position my camera kneeling down in the boat and maximizing and taking as many shots as possible to give myself the opportunity to get a shot like this. So I love the wing position on the cormorant. I love the neck position. I love the leg position. I love the water coming off the back end. That water being against the dark background. If that water was against the pale background, it wouldn't stand out, but it does against that dark background. I love the fact that the right wing on the cormorant does not overlap the two Inca terns. I love the head angle and the body angle on the two Inca terns in the background. The technical specs for this particular shot, I was using the 150 to 400, shooting at 500 millimeters with the teleconverter, 1/3200th of a second shutter speed at ISO 2000 f5.6. 1/3200th of a shutter speed and 1/2500 is really a minimum for shooting in a rocking boat on in the ocean doing birds in flight. Now, bird tracking, subject detection, I mean, thank God for that, getting this kind of a shot. So what I do, I picked up this cormorant way back, way back. I would watch and see which ones were going to curve and come in front of the boat. If it looked like they were about to go to the rear, I let go and look for another subject, okay? So I picked one up and I grabbed focus well before I wanted to get a shot. I wanted the birds against the dark background as much as possible so they'd stand out. Notice the light is fairly soft and even. Had it been harsh, it would have been coming from the left. I don't think the shot would be in front of you today. So as the bird's coming around, I start taking shots when it's against a dark background, and then it's coming in for a landing, and I just keep shooting. Now, one thing with photography, like hunting, you want to follow through even after you finish shooting. Blah, blah, blah. Just keep the camera moving in that direction. Don't just drop it automatically. Follow through, okay? Just follow through with your camera like you're hunting. Same thing. Because we are, except with a lens instead of a bullet. Well, you can't control wing position, head position, foot position, background, and all that. But if you remember my formula, which I've done a video on, for nature photography success, it is preparation plus skill times patience equals luck. I get a lot of people in these boats that they're not patient. They'll kind of give up because it is very challenging photography when the waves are rough. But I've said many times before, challenging conditions often produce the most visually compelling images. For me, not only is this image very rewarding visually, but it's very rewarding knowing what I had to go through to capture that kind of a shot. Clearly one of my favorite shots of the year. I love this image. I love everything about it. In post-processing, I applied a little vignette, just help focus the attention on the cormorant. I toned down the highlights there on the rocks a little bit. I applied some texture to the bird's plumage and a few other things like that. So again, love this image, love the colors. It would have been easy to blow out that really bright orange red between the eye and the bill there and on the legs. But again, by planning your images. So I'm only going to set up to focus in one area. If I were worried about trying to focus all the way around the boat, that'd be a lot different. Now, in overcast light, that's easier. But I'm always metering off something white nearby so that I'm ready for a shot when luck comes my way. Well, image number 5 for 2024 is going to surprise you because it is a street photography image, which I'm certainly not known for. I mean, I think I'm pretty decent at it. I'm no expert. Nobody's contacted me to buy my street photography, but I understand the principles and I would do it a lot more. If I were a billionaire, if I hit the lottery, I'm going to be shooting in cities as well as the wilderness. I mean, I'm going all over doing the things I love because I really do enjoy street photography when the settings are right. I love it at the holidays. I don't know if I'll get to do much this year. I might get to do some, but we'll see. Well, this image is from the Wildside Nature Tours Cuba photo workshop I did back in April. My main goal was photographing the world's smallest bird, the bee hummingbird, which I got some phenomenal shots of. But I'll be honest, and while they're beautiful and many of y'all would kill to have those shots, this image right here is way more visually compelling, at least for me. Okay, and let me explain why. I absolutely loved Cuba. It blew me away. I knew it would be a good workshop, but I had no idea how great it would truly be. And for me in particular, in Havana, the street photography was so fun. I could go out and do that a week at a time, no problem. And I saw this elderly man leaning up against his taxi, which of course is a 1950s vehicle, and I don't remember the make and model of this right off the top of my head, and that's not the main point of this video. But what I love is the doorway just behind the man with the sign Maxima Contemporary Cuban Art. I love the series of doors and windows, how they're at different heights. I love the framing. So I made sure, you'll notice I did not lose any of that metal overhang over the door. I didn't clip the windows on the right. I put the car almost in the center, but the man at the front helps offset the fact that the vehicle is primarily centered. And the colors in this image, the contrast, I love the tonality of this image. So when shooting this image, I was using the M.Zuiko 12-100 f4, a lens I've told you I love, and that is my number one go-to street photography lens. I know it's not 2.8. Yeah, it'd be awesome if it were 2.8. Of course, it'd be bigger and heavier, but I find at the f4, and I don't mind shooting at a little higher ISO either. So this is ISO 200. I'm shooting at 28 millimeters on the lens, 1/500th of a second at f4. Okay, so the man's posture, the fact his arms are crossed, his legs, he has a little bit of spread to his legs, his facial expression. I love the fact he's not looking directly at me. So you have this kind of, you wonder what he's looking at. I will probably print this up on acrylic and put this on my wall somewhere once I get my walls painted. So I love this image. I love the open sign on the back. I love the little black and yellow sign there right above the car. The number on the doorway to the right of the Maxima sign. There's so many elements in this image that I believe work really well. I have a lot of really cool street photography images from Havana, but this one stands out to me as one of my favorites, and it's why you're seeing it today. Now, post-processing, I'm going to do some judicious work of texture and clarity. I believe both those can give an image a pop, but you got to watch clarity because it pushes your shadows and your highlights further apart, and it can blow out or push things into pure black. But to me, this is, what I like too, this is kind of a neat juxtaposition in this image. The old classic car and the sign saying contemporary Cuban art. There's not a lot that's contemporary about Cuba in many ways. I mean, I'm not going to lie, the fact it's a communist country, when I walked up to the shoreline and saw how healthy the coral was because there were no boats out, I mean, in one way, communism has helped protect the coral reefs there. But in another, you see elderly people out spreading rice by hand on a road to dry it and plowing with oxen and working under very brutal conditions. So the country's this really interesting juxtaposition between, quote, contemporary and almost ancient, if you will. So this image captures that. I love it. I hope you like it too. Well, Image number 6 takes me in April to Patagonia, where I was scouting to do a Patagonia workshop with pumas, landscapes, birds, other wildlife. It's not going to just be a puma workshop. It's going to cover a lot more because there is so much to see and do. But my favorite image of the trip was indeed a puma. We came upon a puma. Our puma tracker found her. She was not far off a road. She had killed a guanaco, and I think this was day 2 or 3 that she was feeding on it. If you look in the image just to the back and right of the puma, you'll see the red of the meat of the guanaco that she's been eating. Why did I pick this particular image? Well, clearly I love the fact that she's cleaning, her mouth with her tongue. I love the intensity of her stare. I love the ears being forward. I love her body position. Like, you see the muscles, the ripples of the muscle. You see the head angle is really nice. Good, strong eye contact. If you notice that bush on the left that's blocking a bit of her hindquarters, let me tell you a little bit about Fieldcraft. We are not far from the road. I am probably only, 10 yards at most off the edge of the road. And during the time I shot and photographed this puma, I was there for at least an hour and a half. Very cold. It was windy. The wind chill was pretty cold. I found the spot that opened up as much of her body as possible without disturbing her, because she would lay down and eat. She would stand up and pull the meat out from under the vegetation she'd covered it with. She'd stand up and look at us and clean up a little bit and then go back to eating. Well, that bush on the left, if you stood near the road, it blocked almost all of her. Well, guess where the majority of tourists and photographers stood? Yep, they stood down at the road. And I would try to wave some over and say, hey, come up here, come up. We see it. Oh my God. I'm not asking if you see it. I'm trying to tell you where the better position is. No other photographer ever walked up there near me except one. I'd been there maybe 40 minutes or so. And another photographer came and actually got on the right-hand side of me, very close, which didn't bother me because he had really good fieldcraft and he was very respectful. So I don't mind that when someone has good fieldcraft. Turns out it was a Sony ambassador. And I thought, there's someone that understands fieldcraft and angles. So the irony is there's 2 ambassadors for 2 major camera brands sitting in one spot, everybody else off on the far left missing the best angle because they're not thinking, they're just so, and I get it, man. So exciting to see a puma in the wild feeding. Beautiful scene. This is at Torre del Paine National Park in Chile, right? So beautiful scene. It's easy to let your excitement and enthusiasm overcome your thought process. But in my formula for success, preparation plus skill times patience. Patience is not just waiting in one area for a long time. Patience is the ability you should always be excited. Don't ever get rid of your excitement. You should always be enthusiastic, but you have to learn to contain it. You have to learn. Patience is about learning to stay present in the moment, to stay focused on your exposure, to stay focused on your composition, to stay focused on the background, to stay focused on reading the different angles, to stay focused on anticipating what your subject may or may not do, to stay focused on your shutter speed and is it fast enough to stop what they may or may not do, to stay focused on your environment. Are you safe? Are you being ethical in regards to your subject? There's so much that goes into a visually compelling image, okay? So with this image, here are the technical specs. I was shooting with the OM1 Mark II and the 150 to 400. My focal length was 500 millimeters, so I had the teleconverter turned on. 1/1600th of a second shutter speed. So fast enough to stop whatever she's going to do, stretch, yawn, pull, claw at the vegetation, whatever. F5.6, which is generally my go-to aperture. When people ask me, Lee, what's the best aperture for your lenses? Whatever aperture you need for the depth of field for the image. Stop worrying about the sharpest aperture. That crap drives me nuts. I will never answer that question for you because A, I don't give a rat's ass, and B, it doesn't matter. My God, if all you ever do is pick the sharpest aperture, you're ignoring so much. So much. That's just silly crap. Stop doing it. I might do a series in my Stop Doing It series on that very thing. Well, and then my ISO was at 1600. I'm sorry, my Shutter speed was 1/640th of a second, which is still fast enough to stop whatever she's going to do. Plus, I'm kneeling. I'm using my knee for a tripod in this case. So just resting, shooting very comfortably. I'm knelt down, so I'm at eye level with her. In post-processing, I did a little vignetting. I applied, to her pelt, a little texture, a little bit to the eyes. Didn't have to do a whole lot. When you have great light, again, I love the fact there's very gentle side light. You can see that the front of her is a little bit brighter than other areas, so it's very gentle, it's overcast, but with a little bit of side raking light, giving a little bit of detail, a little more detail to her pelt. Love this image. I just really enjoyed this image because you got to kind of look for why is she licking her mouth. The prey doesn't jump out at you, obviously. So hope you love this image from 2024. Well, for my next image, we're going to go to Brazil. We're going to go to the Pantanal in August on a Wildside Nature Tours workshop. And I think this image, I can probably say this is my favorite image of the year. And it was a very powerful moment having this jaguar walk right towards us. But there are some key elements that went into making this image that I love. So normally when I'm in the skiff in Brazil, I'm at the back of the boat. Most photographers always want to be at the front seat. If you're confident in your skills, your ability, and knowing how to get in the right position, let me be honest, it really doesn't usually matter what seat you're in. Maybe sometimes it's a little easier because you don't have to worry about moving around other people. I never worry about that. I'm going to get myself in the position to get a great shot. So I don't worry about what seat I'm in. I worry about reading the scene, the light, the subject that is present. Well, I often say a vertical subject often warrants vertical composition. I even have a video about that. This is shot vertically. It is extremely, very, very, very rare that I ever crop a horizontal image to a vertical one because you're throwing away tons of data. That's just not how I shoot. I tend to shoot vertically a lot. So this was shot vertical. Why? Because she's a vertical subject. Now you could have shot a horizontal shot and still have some pleasing shots, which I did with her when she got in other areas. So I rotate a lot. I'm very Johnny on the spot, predicting and knowing when I want to shoot vertical and when I want to shoot horizontal. But if you notice in this image, it almost feels like you're the prey and she's coming at you. Why is that? I did a video not too long ago, which a lot of y'all didn't watch because you don't care about yoga. But ironically enough, one of the biggest obstacles to people getting great shots is their physical ability. I'm in a boat. I don't have much room in front of me. I have to slide down as low as I can get, stick my left leg way out, which I couldn't do if I hadn't been doing yoga. I have to put my arm over the side of the boat, so the side of the boat is up in my armpit. I am holding my camera with the back LCD screen flipped out, shooting this image right above the surface of the water. Because I wanted this angle so that you could feel like you're a caiman or a capybara and she is coming at you. So shooting up through the vegetation, my depth of field needed to be spot on, so the technical specs for this image, I'm shooting the OM1 Mark II with the 150 to 400, maxed out at 500 millimeters. My ISO is 1/2000th of a second. You might say, gosh, Lee, there's a lot more light. Yeah, but my shutter speed's 1/4000th. I'm holding at a weird angle. I'm leaning over the side of the boat. I've got multiple people in a boat moving around. How bad would it suck to have my shutter speed at 1/800th of a second because I wanted to be at a lower ISO and for this image to be blurry? And you know what I mean because that happens to you a lot because you worry too much about your ISO. So, and I'm shooting at 5.6, which is what I shoot at a lot for wildlife. So I love the depth of field here. I love the light. You see that nice kind of raking side light, but not too harsh. But let's talk about, so I told you a little bit about the Fieldcraft, how I position myself in the boat. I told you about the technical specs. Let's talk about the creative elements here. Number one, by getting down low, that lent itself to that feeling of being stalked. But let's look at her head angle, her body position, and her leg position. Note that technically, even though this is a vertical image and she's walking right towards me, the far leg is still the leg coming forward. Look at the muscle in her forearm and in her upper arm. Just impressive, the rippling muscles. That paw being where it's at and the angle it's at, I think lends itself very well because of the gap in the vegetation where you can see that paw better. So it opens up her body. It puts her in what I like to call a position of strength. Look at her head angle. She looks regal, right? Her eye contact is strong. The ears are forward. The muzzle is up. It's not hunkered down. The body looks strong, thin, lean, muscular. I love this image. I love the positioning of the subject. Now, notice in post processing, what did I do? I applied a little vignette to make her pop a little more. I did a little lens blur in Lightroom just to give a little more focus on the subject. Just a little bit of a lens blur. Lens blur does not work well in all circumstances. It won't always help you in an image, but in this case, I believe it did. Of course, I applied some texture to her pelt. I brightened the eyes a little bit. I think I brought the highlights down a little bit on her body. They weren't blown out because I'm always looking at my highlight alerts, and I'm metering off the bright parts of the sand. But if you'll notice, the colors are really strong in this image. It's a very warm feeling image. I think this is probably my top image for 2024 in terms of what I personally enjoy the most. Hope what I've told you here helps and has taught you a lot about what I look at every single time I go to take an image. Well, let's take a look at image number 8. This particular image comes from my scouting trip to the Osa Peninsula of Costa Rica to assemble an OM system only macro workshop where we'll be taking a look at things like focus stacking, focus bracketing, using flash, using a diffuser with flash, using other sources of artificial light to capture creative images. Well, poison dart frogs are awesome. I love photographing them. And this particular image is from a setup we had on a tabletop. Found this beautiful red mushroom. And this is Oophaga pomelia, which is commonly known as the strawberry poison dart frog, except that it comes in a ton of varieties of colors. Yellows, greens, blacks, orange, red, white, I mean, all kinds of colors. So they're very small. They can be very challenging to photograph if you're just trying to walk around in the wild. But in order to help our NSS clients, we'll put them on setups and shoot like this. So the technical specs of this particular image, I'm using an OM1 Mark II with a 90mm macro. Duh. I'm shooting at ISO 400, so when I'm using flash, ISO 200 or 400 usually. 1/80th of a second shutter speed. So I tend to use an electronic drive mode. And the maximum flash sync speed for an electronic drive mode at current on an OM1 Mark II is 1/100th of a second. So I never want to go above that, and that's plenty shutter speed when you're using flash with this light macro lens. Aperture is f10. It'll vary anywhere from f10 to f16 based on what I'm wanting to do with the background light. I didn't want any ambient light in the back. I wanted it to be nice and dark, kind of this dark blackish green. So using my aperture, I controlled that. Now you'll notice this dart frog is laying in a very unique way. I really wanted to hurry up and capture this because I did not figure it would stay there long. And while this is a setup, in other words, we went out and picked the mushroom and the log it was on and the frogs. We did not set up the frog to lay like this. It was just happenstance. Wasn't sure how long it would lay like that. And I'm not big on anthropomorphizing animals. I don't like to give them names. I don't mind people that do. Doesn't bother me, but it's just not something I do. But I don't know. This frog looks like he is chilling, like he is having a good time. Like, yeah, get my picture. And it's a very unique pose for a dart frog, so I really want to go ahead and capture it. And I love how the color in the frog and the mushroom contrasts well. I love the body position. I love the little catch light for my flash in its eye. And you'll notice I was just a little bit side lit here. I just love this pose. I love the light. I love the background. I think it's both a visually compelling, but also just a slight bit humorous image because he just, I don't know, it makes me think of like if he was a surfer. Like he's just relaxed, just chilling. And if you know, poison dart frogs normally aren't chilling. They are on the move, hopping, active, foraging, carrying tadpoles. The males will carry tadpoles from, bromeliads down to pools and stuff like that. So very active little guys. They don't chill a lot. So this is just kind of, to me, I love this image. I find it whimsical and very visually compelling. Editing, just a hint of vignette to help darken the background a little bit. I used a little bit of texture on the frog itself. Didn't want to do that on the mushroom. I did pull highlights down just a hair because even with a flash and diffuser, you can still see a little bit of a hot spot back there in the mushroom. I like to tone that down a little bit. Although, you could very easily assume that's just the sunlight coming across there, across the log and the frog and the mushroom, so it doesn't stand out too much. There's not a whole lot else when you expose correctly that you have to do to post-process an image like this. Yes, it was shot vertically. It was not cropped that way. And because if you'll notice, the mushroom, the frog, that's a vertical subject. And if you shot horizontally, you'd have all this wasted dark space on the side. You would then probably crop it to vertical and lose a lot of pixels. So again, shoot vertical when the subject warrants it, And I think that'll learn to help you capture more visually compelling images and not having to crop all the time. Well, image number 9 comes from my OM system only 2-week workshop with a week in Grand Teton and a week in Yellowstone. Why 2 weeks? Because to be able to cover all the computational features in the OM system cameras that can be used for nature photography, if you try to rush that, it will be too much. So in this particular workshop, we look at everything from high-res shot, pro capture, fine-tuning your autofocus, programming custom modes, program custom modes for wildlife, landscape, night sky, macro. We looked at live composite, live time, live bulb. We looked at live neutral density filter, live graduated neutral density filter. We looked at all kinds of settings and, photographing waterfalls and landscapes and wildlife. It was very intense, very overwhelming. Not overwhelming, because my clients say they learned a ton. But I suppose in a way it can be if you don't take your time. And I had a shot envisioned, and I will tell you the shot you're going to see, you cannot capture this image with any other camera system because it's one raw file. And it was done using live composite. Here it is. This is Old Faithful erupting at about 10 o'clock at night, I believe. And pretty bright moon, okay? I knew I wanted to do star trails with Old Faithful at night. And the only thing I'd have to worry about would be car headlights, tourists with flashlights, maybe a bison coming and running you off the boardwalk. We also had the comet. We photographed the comet earlier in the evening facing the other direction. But what I wanted the North Star to be in the image because I love star trails that center around the North Star. I really hope to have a longer exposure and longer star trails, but a Chinese tourist who had lost his wife had a massive flashlight and was starting to walk the boardwalk. We tried yelling at him to turn it off, and all he did was turn the flashlight at us. So we had to stop our images. This is about 30 minutes, somewhere between 25 and 30 minutes long. And we were hoping for a big, eruption of Old Faithful, big, tall one. Otherwise, a short one, which we had later, would not show up very well in the image. But with the moon so bright, we were able to set up. Now our tripods, we're on the boardwalk, so you have to walk very gently around your tripods. We would caution, and there were only like maybe 8 to 10 other people on the boardwalk any time during the whole time we were out. So we really didn't have to worry about that. But I'll tell my clients, once you start live composite, don't keep walking up to your camera and risk inducing shake. So what I would do is tell them to flip their monitor out and they could look from a distance and watch the image develop. Because once you start live composite, you let it run until you like the image and stop it. Well, you'll notice there's some other smaller geysers going off to the back and left of Old Faithful. You'll notice a little bit of light coming across some trees on the far right. That was done by a vehicle, and I actually like that effect in the image. How did I position the North Star with Old Faithful? I mean, because it's blowing right towards the North Star, the peak is. I mean, it's really almost to perfection. I mean, I love this image. Well, using the app Photo Pills, I took a look at where Polaris was, and of course I also took a look at it, using the standard, spread your thumb and your pinky, and it's about that far, was it Ursa Minor, I think it is, the tip of the handle, if I remember correctly. So I knew where the North Star was, but I also knew what direction the wind was coming from. Okay. Originally, my plan was to shoot from further down right on the boardwalk to minimize the lights from the visitor center and cars and things like that. However, because of the wind direction, we repositioned to the left and set up and framed. So what you do, I took a base exposure using my night sky custom mode. So I set my exposure, my base exposure, and my technical specs are the OM1 Mark II. I was using the M.Zuiko 7-14 f2.8 Pro lens, okay? It was set to 8 millimeters. I was at ISO 3200, f3.5, and my exposure time was 8 seconds for each image. Now again, this is a single raw file, so in live composite, the camera keeps taking the same image over and over, only recording brighter pixels. Now, why can you not do this with another camera? Because you could do an interval series and stack them. Well, an interval series would leave some awkward gaps in the vapor, in the mist from Old Faithful. It wouldn't capture it as smoothly as this image would. Furthermore, that would not be one raw file. So when I say you can't do this with any other camera system, you just can't, okay? So, because if you did a base exposure and just let it run for 30 minutes, it's going to overexpose everything, right? So, particularly with that bright a moon. So we started our cameras and let them run, and you can watch live composite develop. This is an incredibly technically challenging image. Several of my clients said, we would have never been able to get this without you with us. That's the point of the workshop, to teach you how to do it. They all captured some really awesome images. Now in post-processing, I actually toned down the light on the foreground from the moon. So I actually reduced exposure on the foreground. There was one tiny little streak of light from a car out to the left of the foreground, which you can't really see. I actually selected that with very fine brush in masking and pulled down the exposure on that so that it balanced with the entire image. I put a little texture on the foreground. On the sky, you know, I wanted to maintain the colors in the stars, so a little bit of clarity, darken the blue, and bring out the colors in the stars. I pulled down the highlights just a hair on the mist and steam from the eruption. Not a whole lot I had to do here. You know, framing, you want to make sure you get this kind of thing framed right. The second eruption from Old Faithful was small. It was not nearly as good an image. So, an amazing experience. Love this image. This is the one image I love to show and say, hey, other camera systems can't do this. So, very happy with how this image turned out. Well, image number 10 was just captured this month during my Grand Teton in Winter workshop. One of the things that I like to do, whether I'm hiking a trail, driving, shooting wildlife, landscape, night sky, whatever, I always like to look backwards and see what is happening behind me. It's too easy to always get caught up looking ahead or to the sides without thinking about what's going on in the rear. So we're not quite to Lake Jackson. You know, we're driving the park road. We had been down near Oxbow Bend, and as we're coming along, there's a spot where I'd photographed hoarfrost before. And as I looked backwards, I could see that the sun had a little bit to go before it got above the clouds. Now, those clouds are moving quickly. So we pulled into a pullout, and I literally sprinted through the snow, crossed an icy stream to get out in the open, because otherwise willows would have been in front of me. So having good, proper footwear for extreme cold with good traction on the soles, you know, being able to stay warm, having your gear ready to go. No tripod here. Technical specs on this image were the OM1 Mark II with the 12-100 f4. I was shooting at 29 millimeters, f16, ISO 200, 1/100th of a second. So I'm at, you know, roughly 60 millimeters, 35 millimeter. My shutter speed should be plenty fast enough, but I took a lot of images since I was hand holding and I'd just been running. And the light in this scene is gorgeous, you know, a little bit of backlighting. And I handheld the camera and turned on the live graduated neutral density filter. That is the key to this image. So the live graduated neutral density filter held the sky back, but allowed me to capture detail in the foreground. I didn't have time to grab my tripod and get set up properly like I would have preferred with a tripod, because I knew the light was going to be fleeting, and this image did not last long. probably under a minute or less, even 30 seconds or so by the time I got back there. So you had fog, you had upper level clouds, you had these low level clouds, and then you had backlighting falling on the sagebrush and the snow, the shadows there in the snow from the rippling in the snow. The trees have just enough detail. This image is full of mystery, light, warmth. What I like about this image, it has both warm and cool light. Look at the sky around the sun, and then look at the right edge of the foreground. Warm, cool light. I love that duality. I applied some texture and clarity to the foreground to really make it pop, give you that kind of crunchy snow winter feel. And then, of course, on the sky, I reduced highlights to give more detail to those upper level clouds in the background. I just raised shadows and exposure, tiny little bit on the trees in the midground there, just to give you a little bit of the depth. You know, I love this image. I think this would be beautiful on canvas, on acrylic, as a print. I think all three of those could look really good with this image. It was one of those that I just barely made it back there, captured the image because that cloud moved more in front of the sun, didn't have that bright part of the sky. So don't forget to use the live graduated neutral density filter, even handheld. It's harder. I even angled it so that it was coming across the image from the upper right down to the lower left, you know, because I didn't want to hold back too much light on the mountain on the right. But it'll work. You can do it, but you got to pay close attention to where you set it, then hit the info button twice and make any adjustments to your exposure. So thank you, live graduated neutral density filter. Well, now I'll jump into my 3 honorable mention images for today's video. I know this is a longer video, but you're getting a lot of good material. At least I hope you think you are. This image was also captured during my scouting trip in Costa Rica on the Osa Peninsula. This is a beautiful, you know, black and green poison dart frog, or Dendrobates auratus. They're a bigger poison dart frog, and I always look for a nice leaf that I think will complement my subject. So this is in a setup. And what I did, I have an LED panel. Nanolight LED panel. I believe it's Nanolight. It might be small rig. I have it on one of my other videos, the one about macro artificial lighting. I have it in there. And all I did was I turned it on and I laid it underneath this leaf. So we had this leaf in a big Wimberley clamp to hold it to a stick. And I put the panel underneath to shine upwards. Okay? And by doing that, oh my gosh, the color from that leaf looks just like the green on the frog. So this isn't a color that you would really expect to see in nature because it's pretty hard to get the sun to come up from underneath this leaf. But I still love this image. This is a creative image in terms of the lighting. But there's, you know, always be willing to experiment with light because, you know, photography, we're all about light. This frog was positioned. I love the head angle. I love the fact that the rear leg is forward and the close leg is pulled back. I love the body angle, the eye position, the head angle. You know, sometimes dart frogs can kind of, if they might hunker down. Man, just take the tiniest little bitty leaf stem or something and just touch the bottom of their chin. That's some Fieldcraft. You can reposition subjects without making them jump if you're delicate, right? And then what I did in post-processing, just a hair bit, tiny amount of vignetting, you know, pulled up the shadows on the subject, reduced highlights a little bit. I think I may have applied a little bit of the lens blur. So the technical specs on this image, OM1 Mark II with the 90mm macro, 1/160th of a second shutter speed. Again, I'm not using a flash, so I could go above 1/100th. My aperture is f8 and I'm at ISO 4000 because it's just natural light, very low light setting. And I'm resting my elbows on the edge of the table to give me some support. And I took a bunch of images. I'm not worried about recharging the flash for the image. So, and then I'll find the sharpest one. I could have done focus stacking or focus bracketing is what I tend to do on this image, but I really like the shallow depth of field because for me, the green and the black on the eye are what make this image. I love that eye. I mean, he almost looks like a superhero frog, doesn't he? Love this image, so it's a runner-up for me. Well, image number 11 and my honorable mention is an orchid fly, also in Costa Rica during the scouting. And for those that join me on the OM System Only workshop in September, you'll get a chance to photograph these. One of the leading entomologist in all of Central America, will be with us for, I believe, 2.5 or 3 days or something like that. And he actually buys pheromones to attract the orchid bees. They come in different colors. So this is handheld, using a flash. My lens is inches, and these are very spooky bees. So you have to follow certain Fieldcraft. You can't move around a lot. You have to find where so he'll dab the pheromone on a little piece of cotton and put it near something. And then you have to sit there fairly still. You can move a little bit, but if you move a lot, they're going to fly off. So, believe it or not, this is the key to this image. I was using AI subject detection set to birds. Because the eyes are big enough, subject detection was doing a great job of picking up these bees. I captured probably 20 sharp images, but I was looking for the one with the best wing position, the best body position, the best light. Now, I did crop this image some. Because some images I had close enough where I didn't need to crop, but this one was just a little further back than I'd like. Using the OM1 Mark II, the 90mm macro, 1/160th of a second at ISO 800, and I got off of electronic drive mode. I wanted a little faster shutter speed, and f14, okay? So we're relying on the flash to stop this, but the duration, I believe I was on manual power, maybe around 1/4. So the speed of the flash was not fast enough to stop the motion of the wings. You can see there's a little bit of blur. Sometimes you'll stop it depending on the position of the wings. Sometimes it'll be blurry. So, love this image. I mean, in flight, orchid bee, and you're talking an insect that's maybe a 1/2 inch long, maybe in that at maximum. So to capture that in flight, what's cool is one of our hosts who's only been using OM system for a couple of years did what I told him, and he got some phenomenal images of this bee in flight. So very happy. Might have made my top 10. It was a tough decision. It's not an easy image to get. Let me explain that. But if you follow certain principles, you can do it, particularly with the AI subject detection in the OM system cameras. So when people tell me, oh, I just don't think the AI detection works that well in OM cameras, I go, well, it may not work that well for you, but it works phenomenal for me. It's because they don't understand the settings, all the multiple autofocus settings that we have available to us, and how to employ it well. All right, we come to our last image. I hope you've stuck to the whole video and you're learning. And this is image number 13, or honorable mention number 3. This was just during the Panama macro workshop that Chris McGinnis, another OM system ambassador, co-led. He did such a phenomenal job. It was his first workshop with us. I'm giving him that workshop to lead by himself. He's an amazing, he only pretty much shoots macro. I mean, he'll do birds and other things, but macro is his bailiwick. But we went out to Bird Island, out in the ocean there off Isla Bastimentos and Boca del Torres region of Panama, where some red-billed tropic birds nest. And they fly around this rock, and we went to the backside of the rock where only a little bit of sunlight was coming over the top. And as soon as I saw the light, I knew this was going to be my favorite. We had been shooting front and side light earlier and got some beautiful shots. Most of my clients didn't shoot back here because, quote, it was too hard. Even though I told them we have live highlight alerts set up and photograph it, and they didn't see the image potential here, which a lot of beginning and intermediate photographers won't because they see it so hard. But what you do is you set up your mind for a specific image. This image right here is exactly what I set up to do. I wanted backlighting coming through the primaries, the secondaries, rim lighting to outline the body of the bird, the light to pass through those beautiful central tail feathers, the light to pass through that red bill, giving you this beautiful surreal type image. I mean, I love this shot. I love the dark background. And all I did in post-processing was I pulled the highlights down a little bit on the subject, so I did a mask on the subject. I brightened the shadows a tiny bit, not much. I didn't have to darken the background. It was already dark. I don't think I cropped this image. If I did, it was only a little bit. The technical specs are the OM1 Mark II with the 150 to 400 set to 500 millimeters. My ISO was 400. My aperture was 7.1. I went a little more in depth because I had so much light, because my shutter speed was 1/10,000. And oftentimes I actually captured shots of multiple birds, so I wanted a little more depth of field, but in this particular case, 5.6 would have been fine. I just would have had to have a faster shutter speed. So beautiful backlit image. Don't avoid challenging lighting conditions. A few of my clients stood up and shot for just a few moments, but the problem was they didn't set up for a specific type shot. They were trying to photograph everything. The birds off to the right that weren't against the dark background, the birds off to the left, the birds everywhere. No. When you have challenging lighting conditions and we're standing up in a boat, pick a spot and go for a specific image. That's my whole phrase. Set yourself up for success, not failure. So I hope you enjoy this image. I love this image. It's a beautiful image. Hey, photographers, if you stuck it out with me through that entire series, I hope you learned a lot. I hope you really enjoyed it. Let me tell you what I hope. I hope that if you're an OM system shooter, you'll join me on OM only workshop at some point in the future. You will love it. You will learn a lot. Most professional photographers who don't shoot OM, they just don't know much about it. I hear from clients all the time when they ask for help, they say, oh, I don't know anything about it. I never say that to a Nikon, Sony, Canon shooter. I generally know it or I can help you with it. But I hear that all the time. So I've got a macro only in September in Costa Rica. I've got the 2-week computational photography features, programming custom modes, autofocus settings in Grand Teton and Yellowstone. I've already got a few folks signed up for that. I've got some folks signed up for the Costa Rica one. My OM only bird in flight in Florida is already filled. I may be looking at adding an OM only bird in flight in the fall. You know, I've got Yellowstone OM only, but I've also got non-OM only workshops as well all around the world. So hop over to the Wildside Nature Tours website, take a look at that. Listen, I hope you have a very happy new year. I hope 2025 is outstanding. Remember, guys, you only get one day to live, every single day. This is going to be my only December 29th, 2025. I'm going to make the most of it. An attitude of gratitude will make you a better photographer. Following my formula for nature photography success, that'll make you a better photographer. So as we go into 2025, be thankful that we live in a country where we get to pursue photography for fun, maybe for a living, maybe for some side money. I hope you'll join me out in the field. Thank you for all you did for me in 2024, being a part of my online community. I will see you in 2025. I'm heading to Zimbabwe and Zambia January 3rd. Wish me luck.